Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. We got some quite exciting news that I think just kind of landed earlier today. Madeline, on desktop, you can share reactions in Spaces.
Yes, this just came out of left field for me today. I'm just hanging out in Spaces on desktop, and all of a sudden I see the reaction icon, and I'm like, oh, I can finally do this on desktop. It was quite exciting. And also you can turn captions back on. We had heard about that recently, but both those buttons are right next to each other when you're on desktop. And so I was playing around with both of them. I was very easily able to do reactions. I was able to turn the captions on. So I'm pretty excited about this on desktop. I've mentioned here before that I use desktop on Twitter way more than mobile. And so I'm always happy to see features like this for those of us who really enjoy the experience on desktop.
So do you think this is going to encourage more engagement for people that might have been dropping into Spaces on desktop? Is it really going to make a difference?
I think so. One of the biggest frustrations with me listening to Spaces on desktop is that I can't do the reactions with everyone else. And I find it frustrating. Plus, when we're here live, Suze, that there's a flip side to that. When we're hosting this live, plenty of times we see people not doing reactions, right? Some of them could be on desktop and they weren't able to. I would like to use reactions when I'm on desktop listening. So I think that will encourage more engagement, and it will help the speakers, see if what they're talking about is resonating with the audience even more. I know most people are on mobile, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that tune in on desktop.
I find it really interesting how that kind of emoji vocabulary, if you like, has found its place on Spaces and in social audio in general. Like, we expect it on, Clubhouse. We like to be able to press and hold our profile picture and share a reaction, even if we're not on the microphone. On LinkedIn, equally, we've got a kind of palette of different emojis that we can use. And I find that really interesting how what was effectively like a kind of emotion keyboard created for a smartphone has become this kind of dictionary of stuff that people really expect in Spaces where you're audio only, because it allows you to take part and show your support or your not support for whatever's being said without actually having to take the microphone. So I think it's quite just so interesting how that phenomenon has kind of followed social audio along, and opening that up to desktop as well, as you say, should allow the people that are listening on desktop to really take part in the space. And you've said before, Madeline, like quite often you'll have a space on a tab on desktop, a bit like you might have listened to the radio or have something playing via a smart speaker or something like that. Now it's just like one click away for you to actually be involved in that. So I think it's a really cool addition.
Yeah, I'm glad that they finally did that. And I'm thinking, yes, probably because they just added discoverability on desktop quite easily now on the right sidebar. They got this new Listen Live in Spaces, and it shows you 3 spaces happening right now based on the people you follow and who's hosting and speaking and tuning in. So by them adding now for us to be able to get those reactions in on desktop, I think is really showing that their data has demonstrated there are enough people listening on desktop, so they need to provide more features. So I'm really excited about it. And again, I'm big with using desktop. So this encourages me even more.
Well, once again, it's nice just to see something added into Spaces, whether it's desktop, whether it's the app. It's nice to think that somewhere over there at Twitter has been given the brief of, right, make this happen for Spaces by this date and, improve it or maintain it or create something for it, because it kind of feels like those memos might have stopped happening in the last year or so. So it's encouraging that someone somewhere was given the job to make this thing happen. It's happened and it's being noticed and is going to make hopefully a difference to, people interacting and joining Spaces. Funny you should say about the panel on the desktop as well, because earlier I thought that mine had completely disappeared, but I realise now, just by what you've just said, obviously no one that I follow was hosting a space or in a space at that moment. So aren't they missing a trick there? Because I'd quite like to be recommended some spaces by people that I don't follow. And that panel would be the ideal place. It should never be not there or empty, right? It should always be,
I agree,
full of content for me to find.
yes. I'm surprised that they're not doing that. Yes, it defaults to showing you, first of all, based on how many listeners. Like when I look on my right sidebar on desktop, there's a space going on right now with 768 listeners. So that's number one. The next one's 460, and the one after that's 367. Now, on my Twitter Smarter Twitter profile, I'm going to always see 3 of them in there because I follow a lot of people, and it's based on who you're following. So it's showing me in the first one, showing me somebody I follow is speaking in that one, and showing me on another one, so-and-so is speaking. I think what they should do is, because I do have another profile with not nearly as many followers, and is very different when I'm on that one. I'll be lucky if I see one at all, maybe one, maybe none. I think what Twitter should do is keep it the way they have it as a default. And then let's say, well, right now, based on who you follow, there's only one space that fits into that. That should be in the number 1 slot, and number 2 and 3 should be like what you're saying, to encourage discoverability, maybe just based on the topics or things that you're interested in on Twitter, and have it populate that space. So yeah, I think they're doing a disservice by not showing you any results.
Yeah, either that or replays from people that have been in spaces or that host them. Like we were talking last week about how can we get more people listening, not only live, but to the replayed version. The replays are there. It could be suggesting to me that you might not have heard this space by someone that you follow, but it's available for replay. So why not hit the button and listen to it now? It could be used so much more as a discoverability engine for the platform. And it just feels, like they're not making the most of that area.
I agree. We got some great ideas for them. Elon, are you listening? And speaking of desktop, so there's been in the news this week about this new improved TweetDeck. And so I thought, well, Spaces is supposed to be incorporated into this. So while I was playing around with Spaces on desktop, I thought, let me go into TweetDeck and let me see if, what is new with Spaces over there. I was just interested what's new with TweetDeck over there because I've used TweetDeck off and on for many years. It's pretty plain, and I can tell you I typically prefer just being at twitter.com instead because there's so many limitations in TweetDeck when it comes to composing tweets, doing GIFs, having that flexibility. So I go into the new TweetDeck today, and now it's new and improved, and you can't even use the old version anymore. It's this new version that before you could test and preview, but now from what I can tell, it is 100% the new. If you've used TweetDeck, you are allowed to have it carry over the different columns you had already set up. So I did that, and it didn't bring all the columns over, but it brought most of them over. And I thought, okay, my mission now is to see how do Spaces work inside of TweetDeck, because before couldn't really do anything with it over there. So I have a screenshot showing you what I did. I went into TweetDeck. I was hoping that when you add columns, there'd be one specifically for Spaces discoverability. There was not. So then I thought, well, there's that search term you can do to pull up current Spaces, but I couldn't remember what the parameters of that search was, so I wasn't able to do it. So what I did on regular desktop, this is just how my mind thinks. I'm like, well, let me go back over to twitter.com. Let me go find a space that's live right now from the sidebar and go click on it, get it on, and go get the link, and then come back over into TweetDeck and figure out how can I listen to this over in TweetDeck. So I get that link, go into TweetDeck. The only thing I was able to do, and this is what the screenshot shows, I go into the search, I put in the link to the space, and then it created a column, and it says search. So you just see that column in the middle. It just populated that into a column automatically. And then I was able to click on it because it said it was live, and it did join. And then on the right side, like you would see it on regular twitter.com desktop, it brings up the space. And just like at twitter.com, inside of TweetDeck, you have the ability to do the reactions and to turn on captions. So I was quite excited by this, Suze, because I had played around with TweetDeck earlier in the week and I didn't see this. So I'm thinking this is pretty new.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't used TweetDeck for a while, but I did used to enjoy being able to follow a hashtag or an account over there. As you say, you've kind of fudged it and worked out a way of doing a search around a particular space. But it would be great if they just had a Spaces menu, a Spaces column that you could actually load up there that would show you the Spaces tab, right? So it would show you all the spaces that are either live or coming up of the people that you followed. It would be nice to think that that would be automatic, but I guess, what's in it for TweetDeck to be promoting Spaces particularly? I don't know, but it would be great if that worked in that way. I'm sure there are a few people that would use it.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't have some easy way to have your spaces inside of TweetDeck, but you can go into the column, click on search, and just go about it that way, which is what I did. So kind of a roundabout way. I mean, the whole point was to not rely on twitter.com on that browser to find a space to then go open up a TweetDeck. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. Why would I go over to TweetDeck then? So I think that's something they need to work on, is find a way to give us discoverability right inside of TweetDeck. And if they do, I would probably go back to using TweetDeck quite regularly, but I don't. Right now, I just use twitter.com whenever I'm using Twitter on desktop because everything I need is right there. Why use TweetDeck if there's just not something better about it? I think that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to have some kind of advantage or benefit to using it. Otherwise, as you say, you might as well just be in the main app. I mean, I see you found also a tweet from Twitter support with them saying about this kind of getting working. It says there's some notes there as well on the future of the product. Does that highlight anything in particular?
Well, they do mention spaces in here. That's what really piqued my interest when this tweet came out earlier this past week. It says, TweetDeck now supports full composer functionality, spaces, video docking, polls, and more. So yes, they finally have the ability when you're composing a tweet, when you're polls, everything. It's all in there now, whereas before it was quite limiting. But they mentioned spaces, and that's why I thought, oh, okay, there's going to be a column specifically for spaces you can add. So I don't know if they just mean, when you're in spaces, if you see a space in your feed, you can click on it and tune in actively, whereas before it wasn't like that. So I don't know. I was hoping it'd be something a little bit more exciting than this, but at least they're acknowledging that you can listen to spaces inside of TweetDeck. And one thing I do want to mention that does make TweetDeck stand out, it's not like it's not worth using if you're using twitter.com. The benefit over just twitter.com is that because you have the columns in TweetDeck, I can very quickly and easily be looking at multiple lists and my notifications and my scheduled tweets without having to go at twitter.com and go from link to link to link or have a bunch of browser tabs open for each item. So it kind of condenses it all together vertically, which some people like. And so if I want to use Twitter really fast and I want to see a lot of things at once, that is when I actually do like being inside of TweetDeck. So I think if they can just figure out a better way to give us discoverability for spaces, then I'm going to have no need to be at twitter.com. I will always be in TweetDeck.
I mean, it's the only way to follow a Twitter chat.
Yeah. If you're doing Twitter chat, TweetDeck is the way to go for sure.
I would never have been able to keep up with Twitter Smarter any other way.
There is no other way, that's for sure. One of the other things in this tweet from Twitter support that I find interesting is at the bottom it says, in 30 days, users must be verified to access TweetDeck. So that's telling me that if you are not subscribing to Twitter Blue, that in 30 days, you will not have access to TweetDeck anymore. I mean, is that how you interpret that? Because it sounds like they want this to be for paid subscribers only.
Yeah, that does sound like that. Yeah. I mean, is this all tied in with the whole API funding thing? Are they needing, I don't know. I don't know how TweetDeck really fits into the business of Twitter overall, but it seems to me that we're losing lots of those different kind of third-party or adjunct apps that we might use to access Twitter and some of the content, and that is all kind of down to the API fuss. maybe that's part of it somewhere. Not sure. But yeah, it does read that way. Yeah.
Not sure. Right. Yeah. And to continue on this discussion about Twitter desktop, it's interesting how usually we don't have much to say about Spaces on Twitter desktop. But there was a really good video you discovered from our friend Eileen where she just made this short little, was it like a 6-second, 7-second video showing you that when you are on desktop and you see that sidebar on the right, that don't forget there is a show more link below it. It's going to show you the 3 that are live right now and then a show more. And when you click on that show more, it just brings up a whole bunch of them. Of course, I'd rather just go to spacesdashboard.com. No, that is not a paid ad, but we just love Spaces Dashboard. So we always recommend it every chance we get because it is a great way to discover Spaces. But I forget to click that see more. So I like when I see these reminders like that. So kudos to Eileen for making a very short little video that shows you. But one thing that's interesting that some people, and I noticed she did have a comment in that tweet from somebody, sometimes when you click on that show more on desktop, this thing comes up. This says nothing to see here, like this, almost like an error page from Twitter. But in my case, it pops up for just a second or two, and then it shows all those other spaces. And then sometimes it will get stuck on this nothing to see here page, and I just hit the refresh, and then I see all of those other spaces.
See, you're more persistent than me, because when Eileen sent me this in the DMs the other day, I was like, oh, wow, how has she found that? Where's that at? I want to see that. So I put the twitter.com/i/spacebar into my search bar and just got the nothing to see here. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went back to Eileen and she said, well, maybe it's like one of these rollouts. They tend to do that, don't they? Maybe they're rolling it out in the US. It's not over here yet. And so I kind of put it down to that. But yeah, I have never seen this before on my desktop. And you just saying about the, clicking on the show more at the bottom of that panel, I get the nothing to see here. So I don't know. It's great to see Eileen's video because it's not something I'd seen before and not something I seem to be able to access for some reason.
So it could be with you in the UK and us in the US. That's a possibility that happens sometimes where it's not all countries. But what I've noticed, and this has been since we've had the 3 on the sidebar, which has been for a little while now, is that if I do click the show more, I just don't think to do it, but when I do, even at the beginning when we first got this feature, that every once in a while, for me, it does stay stuck. Well, trying to say that fast, on nothing to see here. And I'm like, but the way I operate is, well, no, that can't be right. So I hit refresh, and for me, that usually fixes it. So next time you get the chance, try a refresh. And that's also for our listeners, and see if that fixes it. If it does not, then apparently they're not giving you the access. And I'm so sorry.
Well, talking about not being able to see things, this next tweet from Morgan is all about not being able to access Twitter content if you're not logged in. Is that right?
There's been a lot of crazy things happening over this past weekend at Twitter. It makes you think it's a startup company. They had all these rate limits going on. None of it affected me, but boy, did I have a lot of people reach out to me about the issues they were having. And then all of a sudden, this thing happened where if you're not logged in to Twitter, you could not see tweets. You couldn't listen to Spaces. You couldn't do all these things. So that's been going on for days. Now, here's what's interesting. This morning, I see tweets going out saying, this has been lifted. You can now still see stuff if you're logged out. And I wanted to test this to see. I'm rarely logged out. So I go to my desktop, I log out of everything. But I saved a link first. I saved a link to a space. I copy and pasted a link. I'm like, okay, I'm going to completely log out and see if I can get into the space and listen to it. And I could not. It would not let me listen to Spaces. When I was in the login screen, nothing. The only thing it would let me do is sign back in, like what you see in the screenshot from Oregon. That whole sign into Twitter, that was the only thing I could see. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe the information I got this morning was false, or maybe it's just being rolled back out and I just don't have it yet. So from a little bit more research I've done today before starting this space with you, Suze, is it sounds like they're rolling it back out to everyone where you will be able to see tweets and listen to spaces without being signed in. But I'm not able to do it just yet. So I'm not 100% sure, because sometimes when these types of news things break, unless you hear it directly from Twitter, sometimes it's just a lot of he said, she said, and just don't know for sure what the answer is.
I'm just trying to think, like, what's Twitter's kind of benefit of preventing people from accessing content if they're not logged in or don't have an account or whatever? I'm fairly sure that I think we've spoken before about being able to access spaces without being logged in or without being a Twitter user. And I know Clubhouse, that was a big thing that we spoke about. They allowed it so that you could, share a Clubhouse link in your newsletter, and people didn't have to be signed in or a Clubhouse user to be able to listen in to your content. If they wanted to speak, they needed to sign up, fair enough, but they could at least experience being in a social audio space without having the account. Now, could this be kind of a follow-on from what we were talking about last week, where they were stress testing, or we hypothesized that they were stress testing the platform? We found spaces that were flooded with bots. Were they trying to see, were they trying to break it, see how many people they can get in there before it crashes? Is this the same kind of thing? Is this all about limiting it and then working out how many people can actually use the platform at one time in different areas? Could this be part of that? I don't know.
It's hard to know. I imagine Morgan and Andrew probably know more about this than I've just been reading things here and there for days now on Twitter about all of this. The whole rate limit thing had to do with data scraping and third-party tools and AI, and it's just been so much to try to understand. So I'm not sure how much of that is tying into all this. I just know that limiting people who are not logged in is not smart, because we know that's how a lot of people are utilizing Twitter. They're not going to log in. They don't want to be logged in. So I don't know what's going to happen. Plus, the other thing too that's been happening the last few days is the Twitter employees are liking that word X now. And this is going to at some point turn into the X app, the everything in one app. And I'm thinking that time is coming very, very soon, because there was a tweet where all the employees were like, their whole tweet was X. So it's almost like they're trying to prepare us. But that's our news we have for this week. I'd love to hear from our listeners and get their thoughts on all of this.
I can see Paul has got the mic. Hi there, Paul. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
Not too bad, thank you.
Doing good.
I just wondered, I know you guys have your ear to the ground and you're looking at people who look at codes and that sort of stuff. If you'd seen that Meta Threads was going to have audio or not. I hadn't read anything anywhere, but I know they said that they were thinking of making calls like way back when Threads was first announced. But I was wondering what you thought of that, because obviously it's coming out tomorrow.
That would be really interesting. I haven't really stayed up on it enough to know about that. I just keep hearing about this coming out. It'll be interesting to see it in action. I do see, because we've been talking about TweetDeck so much today, I do have, keep checking on my TweetDeck, because I do have a Twitter list in one of my columns where I keep tabs of, who's saying what. And Matt Navarra just did a tweet 19 minutes ago saying, has Meta decided to launch Threads early? So he thinks there's a countdown timer 3 hours from now. So he thinks it's actually going to start earlier.
Oh, interesting. I know you can go on iOS and sort of put give me this whenever it's ready, i.e. they want to release it. So I don't know, maybe it will go early. But interesting. I had to look at some of the screenshots and sort of some of the people that look in codes and that sort of stuff. And I couldn't see anything about audio. But then before, when they were announcing, Threads is coming, they were mentioning audio an awful lot. So I don't know if that's a sort of feature that's coming or they're backtracking on it. But I mean, I was running just some simple napkin math numbers, and they could have something that would rival, Twitter quite easily, quite quickly as well. Like Instagram alone has over 2.5 billion people on it. Plus, you've got all the other ones that, they won't all be overlap, but have WhatsApp and then Facebook and that sort of thing. So if they do it right, it could be an easy win.
Yeah, and also it might make sense of why they withdrew all their audio from everywhere else, and potentially what they're actually doing is going, right, we're not going to give audio to anything else because we've got this plan, we're going to release this thing, and that's where audio is going to live for us. It might make sense of that because, there was that flurry of Facebook is doing audio, Facebook and podcasts. And then all of a sudden there was like a real backtrack of like, let's pull the rug from this. No, we're not doing this anymore. And it just all disappeared. And Facebook and Meta were kind of very much not in the pipeline for like audio at all. And most certainly we've not spoken about them in here for a good while. So it would make sense, I guess. To me, it seems like any new social media platform that isn't thinking about incorporating audio somewhere is missing a trick at this point. Back in 2017, 2018, when I was telling everybody that audio was the next thing to come to social media and people were looking at me like I was completely crazy, no one would have even given it a second thought if a new platform turned up and it was just text-based or just image-based or whatever. But I think right now, where we are now, it's very different. So it really wouldn't surprise me, but I haven't heard anything as yet. Will keep my ear to the ground, though.
I had a quick look in their terms of service just to sort of see like how egregiously overreaching it was. And not surprisingly, it is. It said the Threads app can collect data related to your health, financial information, contact information, browsing history, location and purchases, among other things. So as always, very descriptive. But I wonder how much that will be, other elements which were to do with audio and that sort of thing. Interesting though.
Yeah, very. Morgan, I'd love to hear your take on it. I'm sure you've got some thoughts.
He's got his people on it.
He has, I'm sure.
Today I'm coming live from somewhere on the continent, so this is a real social audio moment for me. Yeah, Paul, it's interesting. I haven't seen anything about audio at all either. I got a kind of quick peek at the web version of it. And again, nothing that looked like audio there. There are some interesting details. I think it's going to be, as you said, and you'd expect it from Meta, they've got quite a few little hooks and incentives that I think is going to give things on Threads significant visibility within Instagram. And of course, you can share profiles. And I think 9to5 Google posted a thing where they looked at the binary for the Android app that leaked out early. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm interested to see what it is. A couple of things. You touched on one of the big things that people have been talking about in the last day, which is the data policy. And it is egregious. But that said, it looks to me pretty much identical to the policy you would have agreed to if you use Instagram. And a lot of people use Instagram. So it's sort of like a sudden short shock to remember just what it is to use a Meta property. But it's the same as the other ones, so that there is that. The other thing is, which was sort of relevant, I think, to some of the discussion around rate limiting and limiting sign-on for Twitter the last week. It's very hard to know what to make of that. There are official explanations and a number of other credible ones, but we just don't know. But the kind of the Threads related one is that Threads has a web experience where, as you might hope, you can see any post without being logged in. In fact, there's no concept of logging in at all on the web. Anybody can see anything. You can embed posts in websites, much like you can embed tweets. They try and encourage you to sign up for the app. So if you try and interact with anything, so you like or reply to a post or want to write a new one, you'll be able to download the app. So the web experience is being used to drive installs of the app. But yeah, I don't know what more to say there, really.
What did you think of the web experience? Did you think it like that's their sort of because it was strange considering they've made it an app first experience that they've even done a web version, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I think the web experience there is really to drive sign up, but also give some sense of reach. So because their task in the very early stage is to get firstly inventory. They need in the first week when there's a rush for there to be content for people to look at, posts. And the other one is to have something that's a bit like Reach, so it doesn't feel totally deserted. And obviously linking to Instagram is the main part of that. One of the things they're going to do is give you a optional badge for your Instagram account, which will give you a kind of a joining number. So there's going to be a rush to try and get the lowest joining number possible. But yes, I just like it. I'm still trying to think through this. I've been trying to tweet about it today. And one of the interesting things is doing it as a separate app in the first place, and then doing it as app first with the web not having a login experience and the web being used to drive installs of the app. It's interesting. I don't know, Paul, would you want to say a bit more about why you think they could have a go at growing this significantly here? Because that I think is a question.
So I was looking at, I used to do this sort of stuff with Mindshare when new apps came out and that sort of thing. I used to sit down with Simeon Duckworth, who is an absolute genius when it comes to numbers. And he said, it was like based on average installs, time of day it was released, all of that sort of thing, and sort of the marketing spend and the promotion around it, which has been pretty sort of minimal, that last one. But the virality of two things is sort of really causing me to sort of think, oh, okay, that could have legs. Number one, they just have more people than other people, right? So on average, if they ask someone to sign up for it or they make it ridiculously easy, which they seem to have in this case, then you're pretty much laughing that you'll get a decent install base. Now, that said, will the media tear them a new one if it's not like 1 billion in under an hour? Probably, right? So they're going to over-egg that pudding. But equally, I would imagine they won't want to grow too quickly. Otherwise, it'll just be a shower of shit and all of the spammers and all of that sort of thing will get on there for crypto and all that jazz. The one saving grace on all of that, I think, is that it is tied to your Instagram account. Therefore, you won't hopefully want to be, rampantly putting drivel out and that sort of thing. So I quite like their sort of, as I like to call it, makeup of their launch, if that makes sense. I think because they have so many levers they can pull, and not just on individual platforms, but platforms in general. If they wanted to launch something across pretty much the three biggest platforms, or three of the, I don't know, top 10 out there platforms, they could have a pretty fat install base pretty sort of quickly. And the fact that they're going iOS first is always interesting because you get the right, quote unquote, finger wiggles, right people, not just a bunch of nerds from Android, although they are sitting on both sides of the fence. I totally agree. You get the advertisers on board and that sort of thing, and that's what they'll want as well. So again, they're going to probably push out a lot of quality content. They're going to try very hard to sort of like belay all the spammers, I would imagine. And essentially, they've done this quite professionally, whereas other ones have either been acquisitions, so they didn't really need to sort of do anything like that. And also, this is the one where they can come out the gate and actually look like a winner. So again, why not sort of kick the goal, harder?
Yes, so my feeling here is that Zuck is taking this pretty seriously. And Meta, when they were Facebook, released a number of standalone apps under a kind of Skypeworks app studio, and none of them really worked. But this time, it feels like they're really pulling out stops here. And from what I've seen, quite a bit of certainly the experience of the app, but the way that they're integrating this feels to me like they're really executing here. Now, bigger picture, the other way this is being framed in the media is, Mark versus Elon, and the hate fight and Twitter killer. I'd really discount that. I think Instagram has a very different social graph to Twitter. And the idea that you could get a mass movement of people from Twitter to Instagram in the way that would seriously jeopardize Twitter, I think is probably not hopeless, but not the thing. I think what this does, this is a phrase I'll borrow from John Constantine, is this is Meta trying to steal Twitter's future. This is saying, look, if Twitter did grow under Elon, that's a problem for Meta. So he's going in when Twitter is relatively weaker and trying to do a thing that stops Twitter growing to that extent. So if there is a market for something that is like Twitter, that is much broader than Twitter has had until now. So somebody might say, "Oh, look, Twitter's only got a certain million number of users. suggest that a Twitter experience is not something that most people want. It's not something that could be a giant platform. I think Meta getting involved suggests that it can be. They think it can be. And they want to get to that. Of course, they're going to do things like they look, this is a very brand safe place to be. We've had some of that Zuckerberg talk about, like an unstable CEO. And you can see a point where Meta, what they'll do is, if this goes well, to have a big installed user base, it might be bigger than Twitter's. It won't be the same as Twitter. And it might mean that it's harder for Twitter to grow. It might also mean that Meta could take a good chunk of the ad dollars that Twitter wants to grow into. So that's the kind of strategic piece here. But I don't see this being a Twitter killer. It just changes the competition game.
I think in a sense, it will. I agree. It won't kill Twitter. There's too much time invested for a lot of people. Therefore, you come across sunk cost fallacy. I can't possibly leave. I've just got to keep adding in because I've grown it for so sort of long. However, I think the killerness of it is two things. Number one, the enshittification of Twitter. It does seem to be happening this week, or the last 2 weeks, actually. I have had ridiculously low quality content based on what they try and give me, and also the ad experience. It's just really terrible. But I think from Meta's point of view, I think their biggest issue will be the fact that all of the news outlets hate them at the moment, and they're trying to desperately do deals so that they don't have to like pull out of different countries and that sort of thing. They've never been friends with the news people. So, and that is a big part of Twitter, right? That is number one, what they've usually called themselves for the last 10 years. I worry that they won't have the sort of it's just my opinion sort of thing, of my interest, that they won't have the news content that I'm looking for in an app like Twitter, whether it's Twitter or Threads or whatever. And that for me is a problem, because I don't just want to watch a feed of what people eat, or like what they think about what they eat, or what they think about reaction to videos. I'm interested in how they help me cut through signal to get to, to use Twitter's phrase, what's happening right now, or what's interesting me, and that sort of thing. So I'm that's what I'm missing, is the sort of like the reason why we're here. They've sort of done what Twitter did. It's like, we're not going to tell you how to use this app, and that to me is a real like failure, because if you don't tell people how to do it, then you'll get loads of people doing really random stuff, and they're just sort of like leaving it to the wind as to decide which way the direction it will go. And I don't think that's a smart sort of move. It's sort of a lazy move, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything you two were just saying. Amazing rundown there of where Threads might be going. And I mean, what a time for them to launch it as well, at a point where all the rate limits and everything over here are happening. More disgruntled Twitter users probably still looking for that Twitter adjunct platform to step off into. We've had a go with Mastodon. We tiptoed around Blue Sky. What great timing for Meta to bring out their golden bullet, maybe. So yeah, whether it ends up with audio in it or not, I think for the social media landscape, it's a really interesting time, and a really interesting one to keep an eye on. But I will certainly be looking out to see whether or not there's any hint of audio being incorporated into it. Next week, we want as many people as possible that have joined All Things Audio in the past, or that have listened to the podcast, or have been involved with us in some way over the last 2 years, to join us, because Madeline, next week is All Things Audio number 100.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe it. 100 episodes. That is amazing, Suze. I just cannot believe we're coming up to that number next week.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, when we started out, I'm sure we'll cover this all next week, but we would probably never have imagined that 100 Wednesdays down the line, here we would be. I mean, a few interruptions there for holidays, Christmas, COVID, but, not too many. Generally, we've been fairly consistent right here on a Wednesday. It's been our spot here on Spaces, and we would love to hear from everyone. We're hoping to have a community chat next Wednesday. So anyone who's around, do please drop by. We'd love to chat to you live on Spaces.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.